Alright, going to show you my Electro Voltaic Grenade Mercenary build. I'm just going to go and make sure that the live stream is working just fine, and we can start looking at that. Should take me 5 seconds. Are we live? We should be. There we are. Okay, good. Alright. So this video is going to be split into 4 parts. I won't be using the little things that show you, like in the scroll bar of the video, where to go to see those parts. I'll put it in the description with the timestamps in there. I have to figure out how to use YouTube. I'm not a pro at uploading content yet, but I hope that this video will be helpful for you guys, or entertaining at the least, because Mercenary is one of the underloved classes, and I think there's a lot of potential. Also a lot of hurdles to overcome, but I've had a lot of fun evolving this build to where it is right now and finding solutions despite the disadvantages that Mercenary has compared to other classes. So in the first part, we're going to look at the skill gems, the support gems, and then we'll look at the passive skill tree real quick, and then we'll look at the gear that I'm using. I'll also, in that section, part 3, cover some of the important aspects you want to look at as you go through the campaign, or cruel campaign, early mapping, so you know what to focus on, what to spend your hard-earned currency on, because currency is a bit hard to come by when you start a cruel campaign and mapping, so it's good to know what to focus your currency on. And then the last part of the video will be me just playing a little bit in T15 maps, maybe T16, showing you the strengths of the build and also the weaknesses, so you can get a feel of if you like this, if you think you could enjoy this and want to try it out. I certainly had a lot of fun playing this. I'm still playing it, I'm not done yet. But yeah, so first part is skills and support gems. So very simple actually. Your bread and butter is going to be Voltaic, Grenade, and Shock Burst rounds, alongside with your Heralds at the bottom here, Herald of Ash, Herald of Thunder. So real quick, the mechanic is essentially you want to be electrocuting and shocking mobs with your Voltaic Grenade. This is the skill that's going to take care of the AoE, clearing most of the trash mobs, helping you progress, position yourself, clear the dangerous mobs as well. Very, very interesting skill. Now, the whole reason why I started focusing on the Voltaic Grenade is because if you look at all the grenades available to the Mercenary, Voltaic Grenade and Flash Grenades have the highest attack damage scaling. By this I mean that when you look at the skill itself here, if you pay attention to my cursor, the green arrow here, you'll notice that the attack damage scaling right now is 318% for this skill. Obviously this number is influenced by the level of the gem, but still, when you compare that to all the other grenades, it's much higher than the explosive grenade or the poison grenade, stuff like that. So one of the strongest grenades actually for the Mercenary is the Flash Grenade. That's the next thing I'd like to try. So maybe eventually I will try and respec this character when I'm done with it into a Flash Grenade build, because of the insane physical damage scaling that the grenade has, but it runs into issues, or at least I have not been tempted to try it yet, because it doesn't seem to have that many synergies with your passive skill tree, other elements and stuff like that, whereas the Voltaic Grenade has a lot of synergies with electrocute, shocking, passive skill tree nodes that help and benefit from the lightning damage that you're doing. It also synergizes really well with shock burst rounds. There aren't that many similar ideas to that that pop up in my mind when I think about Flash Grenade, but eventually I'll get to it. So Voltaic Grenade, AoE skill. So this, the main part you want to pay attention to is the fact that this grenade has a very short fuse duration by default. I believe it's around like 2 seconds by default. You can improve that with passive nodes in your tree. Cooldown, increased cooldown recovery. For instance, I'm running Ingenuity, which gives me cooldown reduction 30%, so you're slashing by about 33% you could say. The fuse duration, so yeah, very low fuse duration, which essentially means that when you throw your grenades, they will explode after a short delay. If the fuse duration is very high, then you're looking at a higher delay before it explodes, leaving you vulnerable for longer. Because the thing is, when you're running very amped up pump maps or dangerous areas with a lot of modifiers, that's the main challenge that you will face when you get into the tier 16, tier 15 maps at the end of the game. That's when you actually want your grenades to pop off as soon as you can, because that's actually defense. If you need to wait a second or a second and a half every time you cast something before it kills the mobs attacking you, obviously you're in danger for longer. But a short fuse duration is acceptable, so Voltaic grenade in that regard is good. So let's look at the gems, let's look at the supports real quick, and before we do that, we look at this here. The Voltaic grenade converts 80% of your physical damage to lightning damage, so obviously this means that your weapon has to have a lot of physical damage, preferably. It has 50% more electrocution buildup. Now, this is something people are not all familiar with. A lot of people think of lightning damage as just shocking, you know, as the ailment it can do. But there's another lightning ailment called electrocution, which is very interesting, different from shock. So I'll explain it super briefly. Electrocution paralyzes mobs for 5 seconds. By default. It could be more, but by default it does 5 seconds, and during that time they cannot take any action at all. They cannot attack you, they cannot cast a spell or a skill, so that leaves you safe to dump damage into them with shock burst rounds and unload all hell and fury onto them, and that is very, very satisfying to do. So that's why I really like electrocution. It's very fun. So the Voltaic grenade in that regard builds up electrocution real well. Really nice, and also the lightning damage from it contributes to the electrocution, obviously. The radius is 2.6 meters right now. The quality, if you add quality to the gem, will add increased cooldown recovery rate, which is crazy good. So you want to have that when possible. So the support gems, very simple. Primal armament for just more damage. So basically what you're looking for with Voltaic grenade in the support gems is as much added damage as you can, lowered cooldown, because what happens is if the cooldown is too high, what you end up doing is, let's say you're in a big amount of action, a bunch of mobs around you in a breach, for instance, or delirium, and you need to constantly dump out grenades onto them to kill them. Obviously you need to get back your mana, but also you need to clear, and if there is a higher cooldown, what's going to happen is you're going to run out of grenade charges, or sometimes they'll call it cooldown uses. So if you look at your tooltip right here, cooldown uses, I've got 3 right now. So that means I can cast 3 shots of grenades before the cooldown activates, and the cooldown is right now it's 1.30 seconds if you look at the bottom right of my screen, before I can recycle a new charge of a grenade. So if the cooldown is low enough, basically what you happen to have is your attack speed will coincide with your cooldown. If you can get that sweet spot, have your attack speed coincide with your cooldown. By this I do not mean that your attack speed number has to be the same as a cooldown. What I mean by this is the cadence at which you can shoot the grenades. If it corresponds with the speed at which the cooldown recovery happens, that means you can constantly shoot grenades, which is basically what you want to be able to do. And then the only limitation to being able to constantly throw grenades will be your mana pool, your mana regen or mana leech, whatever mechanics you use to get mana back. So obviously there are no scenarios in which you want to be shooting endlessly grenades. Oftentimes you'll be relocating, repositioning, using other skills, stuff like that. But yeah, you do want to have the ability to be able to cast grenades to a big enough cadence that you can get rid of the mobs and not face issues. Because one of the very uncomfortable things that can happen with the Voltaic grenade is when you try and use it and you run out of charges here, or cooldown uses, or you run out of mana. So that was my first main challenge with this build, was figuring out the mana cost, the cooldowns and stuff like that, just to get to a sweet spot. But here I'll make it very simple for you guys so you can achieve it. So support gems, primal armament for more damage, scatter shot for added grenades. So basically instead of shooting just 1 or 2 or 3 grenades, you're looking at an extra 2. Obviously there are other places or sources that can give you more grenades. The more grenades you shoot out, obviously the more damage you do. So scatter shot helps in that regard, despite having 20% less damage in the tooltip here. It also adds 2 additional projectiles, so 2 additional grenades. Also less attack and cast speed, but that doesn't matter too much if you already have invested a little bit of attack speed in the skill tree, passive skill tree. So it's not the end of the world. Then we have Ingenuity for more cooldown reduction, like I mentioned before. Lightning Infusion, just for more damage. Then you have Heft, which is really important actually, because this one will give you more maximum physical damage. If you did not know, in Path of Exile, more is a multiplicative damage source. So whereas if you see increased damage, usually that is a lesser addition of damage than the word more. More is multiplicative. So not only that, but also if you have more maximum physical damage onto a lightning damage based skill, as you guys probably know from Path of Exile 1 if you played, or if not I'll tell you now, but generally speaking, lightning damage has a very wider pool from which it will pull for damage. So again, a short explanation: imagine you throw a die, and the number between say 0 to 2000 is your damage pool. That's for lightning damage. Most of the time if you're talking fire or cold damage, that pool is much tighter. So for like fire, you'd be talking 200 to say 600 damage for the pool. So a much tighter pool, the damage is more consistent because it's always in that pool the same kind of number, whereas lightning can be all over the place like a roller coaster, which is why in your passive skill tree, which I'll cover that later, you can get ways of increasing the chances that your damage will be pulled off of the higher end of your maximum damage, or your damage for lightning. So you want that to have a larger pool for your lightning damage, so that when you toss that die and you actually toss it twice, you get a higher number for your damage, which I'll get to later. So Voltaic Grenade, clear stuff, clear adds. Build up Electrocute, and it builds up Electrocute really fast. That's one of the fun things about this build. I mentioned that I had a lot of fun with this build because it's very different from what most mercenaries are running. Most mercenaries are running explosive grenades, poison grenades, which is very efficient. If you look on YouTube, Woodijo's, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, guide, it's very helpful, very complete. And it works really well, but it's very redundant. You're pretty much cycling through specific grenades all the time, and all of your damage is delayed. And it's very efficient. It's a very good build, but the problem is you get bored by it within, say, like 30, 40 levels, because you are always doing the same thing. It doesn't feel very engaging. You don't feel like you're fighting the hordes of hell. You're pretty much just running through the motions, and it's like the build plays itself. Whereas this build, you're much more involved, using your wits, using your intelligence to get the results you want and to fight better. So it's fun. You feel much more engaged. You feel like a mercenary. You feel like you're wearing that crossbow and just kicking ass, if I can say it that way. So it's fun. So this is for Voltaic Grenade, shock burst rounds. This is your single target damage. You pull this thing out whenever you're facing rare packs or rare mobs or unique bosses. You don't generally want to use it on blue packs or white mobs. It's not that useful for that. You can use it to finish off someone who's about to die, but generally speaking, I keep this for the targets that are harder to kill. So this skill, shot burst rounds, loads your crossbow with bolts that are charged, and they will hit the enemy and do a pulsing of damage, like a low AoE, if the enemy is currently under a electrical ailment. So we're talking electrocution or shock, which you'll apply both with this build. So whenever the enemy is electrocuted, it's quite obvious for you to see in your screen, because with all the action going on in the screens, sometimes stuff like shock isn't all that obvious because there are so many mobs, and the animation for shock is rather discreet. It's lightning bolts around your target, but it's small. It's not very obvious. Whereas electrocute is very obvious and very satisfying. Whenever you proc it on an enemy, the enemy will become like stunned, and you see it shaking like he's under a high current of electricity. Very nice to see, and it's very obvious. It's your cue for you to pull out that shock burst round and just unload fury onto your enemies, and it's just very fun to do. So that skill basically converts, again, physical damage into lightning damage, but your main source of damage comes from the pulse. So if the enemy is under an electrical ailment, this is where you get the big damage here. Converts 100% of your physical damage to lightning, which is great. And the clip size for that ability is quite high. Right now, for me, it's 19. I'm wondering why it's 19. I'm usually at 21, 22. I must have changed something in my setup that is causing me to have less, but I usually have more. I'll figure out why later. But basically, you got a large clip. You unload onto your enemies. I'm just going to sell this real quick. Yeah, it takes care of the single target damage real well. I'm just going to go and find this thing. Where is it? Should be in here. Advanced brim. Okay. That's the one. I'll take care of this real quick. There you go. So yeah, the support gems for your shock burst rounds are basically going to add damage to the shock burst rounds, help you consume less ammo, and also increase the attack speed, because that's the main thing with your shock burst rounds. You have 5 seconds, right, to unload the damage onto the single target with your shock burst rounds, because the electrocution lasts for 5 seconds, right? Now, obviously, you can use shock burst rounds when an enemy is shocked and not electrocuted, but it's often the best time to do it when they're electrocuted, especially bosses or big dangerous mobs, because oftentimes when they're able to cast their things at you in dangerous environments, you're not free to do that. Shock burst rounds, you have to be aware that you're going to be standing still and unloading, right? That this means that you're not mobile anymore. You can't dodge as much, and if you do, you're wasting that precious 5 seconds of time that you want to use to unload damage, which is going to be heavily buffed because the enemy is currently electrocuted. So you want to use that 5 seconds and take advantage of it as much as possible, which is why the attack speed is important. I'm just going to sell this real quick. I think this was supposed to be 65. Yeah, whatever. That's good enough. Oh, he added Chaos Orbs. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Good luck, Exile. Alright, put this away. Okay, continuing with the skills. So, Voltaic Grenade, AoE, Shock Burst, single target. Let's look at the gems. So, Ammo Conservation. This is actually amazing, because what it does is you have 25% chance not to consume a bolt when you fire. So, this means that when you fire, look at my counter here. Oh, there we go. We have the clip here. 22 rounds, right? Look at me shoot now. I'm going to shoot a lot more than 22 rounds. Because every now and then you'll see that number freeze for like a second or so, because the clip or the bolt won't be used, right? And if that happens multiple times during that clip, you might shoot 30, 35, 40 bolts before you have to reload. And your reload speed is quite high with the build here. So look at this. I'll do it a few times in a row. And you'll see that sometimes the number at the bottom right where my skill says Q, that's my shock burst rounds right here at the bottom, towards the left. Load shock burst rounds. If you look at that, the numbers sometimes freeze because of that support gem, which is amazing because you'll be unloading even more damage without having to reload, which means you take advantage of that 5 seconds even more. Let's look at the rest. Rising Tempest, again, more damage. It says here more damage for each elemental types that you've used recently. Yeah, different skills. So it doesn't have to be with this skill, it could be with other skills. And because we're doing fire, lightning, physical, and sometimes cold damage as well, this will proc. So it's another source of more damage, multiplicative. There could be better support gems. I'll name a few later on. Fresh Clip, also amazing. Whenever you reload, you get more damage for each bolts that you reloaded. And that will synergize with the skill here, Emergency Reload, which pretty much reloads all of your bolts all at once, your whole charger, no delay, right away, and buffs your next clip, right? Your whole clip will be buffed for the next section, and this will also buff. So these two things together will buff your next clip and do a whole lot of damage. And Martial Tempo for more attack speed. Obviously, you definitely want that on your shot burst rounds, because that will allow you to unload like crazy, like I'm doing here, which is really high attack speed. Very satisfying. Okay, so I'll look at the other skills. Hailstorm rounds here I don't really use all that often. The only times I use this is whenever I'm stuck having to keep moving and I can't really focus on my enemies, not even with the Voltaic grenades. Like say I'm in a very dangerous spot, whole bunch of dangerous things on the ground, like fire pools or whatever. I have to move away. and I want the damage to continue while I'm moving away. Or at times when I know that I'm going to fight an enemy, which I have time to set up the fight for, say like a unique boss or whatever, I'll set up my ballistas and I'll change my clip to the hailstorm rounds, and when the fight starts I can unload the hailstorm rounds and my turrets will also damage the enemy, and during that time I can do my other skills, and I'm maximizing the damage I can do within the time that I have for the boss fight. So it's a nice thing to do, but it doesn't synergize that well with lightning damage. Maybe I could improve that later on, but I'm just using it for the ability to be doing damage as I'm escaping, moving, or relocating. Emergency reload, as you notice here, I don't have that many support gems linked. I will fix that later. One of the issues of this build is you do not want to have all of your skill costing like 400 or 500 mana at this point in tier 15 maps. So having only this one support gem right now doesn't add too much cost. There are probably support gems I could use that don't add that much cost, just like a dexterity or strength cost to it. But I haven't tweaked that for now. Doesn't matter. So emergency reload, what it does is it instantly reloads your active crossbow ammunition and empowers the loaded bolts to deal more damage, like I mentioned before. Has a cooldown. The buff is quite substantial, 30% more damage, so multiplicative. I've got the premeditation here, which again adds to the damage that I do with this skill, so great stuff. Synergize with shock burst rounds. And then we've got Voltaic Mark. This is really, really useful when you're fighting rare packs or the unique bosses. The reason why you want to use this is to increase the chances of shocking the boss or shocking the rare pack, so that you make sure that you get your electrocute. Now you might wonder what the heck has shock to do with electrocution, and it's because of the skill tree, which we'll look at in a few seconds. So yeah, Voltaic Mark increases your chances of shocking your enemy, which also helps building up electrocute. I'll mention why later. And that you have to know that the shock ailment adds 20% damage. So when an enemy is shocked, they take more damage. So that is one of the reasons why this is important, and this is especially important against unique bosses, because you want to be building up that electrocute meter as soon as possible, or as often as possible in boss fights, so that they are electrocuted, unable to do anything, and you can unload your damage, and your boss fights will be a lot more fun and a lot faster that way than if you have to pump out damage for a very extended period of time, during which you can get one shot, or you can step into a dangerous zone, or just do a mistake that will cost you the boss fight. And in PoE 2, losing boss fights or dying have higher cost, you could say, or consequences than in PoE 1, because you lose your map, you lose some experience at a certain point during your progression, depending what level you are, if you're doing maps and stuff like that. So yeah, Voltaic Mark increases the chance of shocking your boss or your rare pack. Let's look at the gems. We've got persistence, so that the duration of the mark is higher than 8 seconds. Then we've got conduction for even more chance of shocking. And then I've got lasting shock, which might seem contradictory because it lowers the shock chance by 25%, but it also increases the shock duration by 100%. So this is amazing, because again, it will keep that ailment status on your enemy and allow you to ensure you get your combos. Artillery Ballista is not a required skill, it's just for quality of life. The fun thing about having this in your kit is it gives you another layer of defense, because basically if you've got ballistas like that in front of you, sometimes a boss will focus these, or the dangerous packs will focus your ballistas and allow you to get yourself some more time to relocate, reposition, maybe recharge your mana if you're in a tight spot, and then you can continue fighting. It might sound stupid, but this can make a big difference in your fights. So I do like having ballistas for that. The support gems are fire penetration, overabundance. Yeah, so you can have two ballistas. Fire infusion for even more damage, and then neural overload to again ensure the proccing of your electrocute as much as possible. I have to do some testing to make sure that this actually works, because I haven't noticed it proccing all that much. I'll have to pay attention to really see if it works, but it's supposed to work. Basically what it does is if an enemy is primed for electrocute, so primed is just, let's say the electrocute meter is at 60% or 80% currently on the enemy you're attacking, then they will get electrocuted sooner because of this neural overload. And again, that number is different depending on the rarity of the enemy you're fighting. So if they're normal, it would be 40%. If they're magic, it's 60, and so on. You can read the tooltip right here, 60 obviously for a rare and so on. So this is for Ulterior Ballista. And then your Heralds of Ashes and Thunder, those are your bread and butter. There is a big interaction between Herald of Ash and this build here and the Ascension that we're using of Witch Hunter, because whenever you overkill an enemy, so whenever your Ascension right here procs, right, this explosion that deals 100% of the enemy life to surrounding enemies, obviously that can often cause a big overkill or overshoot. So let's say the enemy needed 1,000 damage to die, and all of a sudden you're doing 6,000 damage. That's a lot of over or unused damage, which will proc with Herald of Ash, because Herald of Ash basically says here that while active, the enemies you sufficiently overkill with attacks will cause an explosion that ignites nearby enemies based on the overkill damage that you dealt. Yeah, so this helps with clearing, especially if you got good AoE, and it gets procced and synergized like crazy because of your Ascension, which I just showed you here, Zealous Inquisition, and it helps with your clearing a whole lot. So it might even sound weird, but you want to have your magnified effect support gem on your Herald of Ash. It seems counterintuitive. I tried it, I tested it, and for some reason having the magnified effect on your Herald of Ash instead of your Voltaic grenade helps clear a whole lot, like way more. When I tested it, I could see it right away, so I advise using magnified effect in the Herald of Ash. You can test it for yourself, try it in Voltaic grenade if you prefer. I've got Cannibalism. This is very important. This is one of the ways you sustain your health. It's one of those gems you don't see suggested all that much in your tooltips. It says 4% of life recovered on kill while a supported skill is active. So obviously it's not true leech. You're not getting life back based on a percentage of the damage you dealt right away. It's only on kill, but it really makes a difference. Oftentimes you can be in a tight spot, and just landing that one grenade in the whole bunch of enemies can take you from like low life to full life in a matter of seconds. So this is a must-have. You can put it on whichever auras you're using. Then you got Clarity, also very useful because mana is an issue with this build, so having solutions for it is great. Precision is always good, helps you with having more accuracy at a distance. So let's say you're doing this combo we mentioned before, shock burst rounds, and the enemy is far away, accuracy will help you. If you're closer to the enemy, it might not be that relevant, but from a further distance it's useful. So yeah, good to have. Doesn't have a high cost to it. So Herald of Thunder, this one is different. There are things, well, you have to read the tooltips, because basically Herald of Thunder cannot shock. If I'm correct, I'm just going to go check the tooltip here. I think I'm right. Yep, cannot inflict shock, at least not innately. So that's good to know, because you'd think that Herald of Thunder is all about shocking enemies, but it's not. It's actually about getting a buff from having killed shocked enemies. So when this is active, if you kill shocked enemies with attack damage, it will cause subsequent attacks to do extra damage, and by default that will be your next 3 attacks, which is why you want quality on the Herald of Thunder, because with quality you will get more of your next attacks to do damage. Actually, you can go up to an extra 2 attacks, which means a total of 5 of your next attacks that will do that burst of damage. So it helps with your clearing. It's really, really good to have. It synergizes with your things really well. And I use the support gems that follow: Elemental Focus for more damage, Execute, again for more damage, Long Shot for more damage as well. The criteria being the distance between you and your enemy, so you have to be at a longer distance, but it's just a way of getting more damage, because at this point you cannot use all the support gems that you'd want repeatedly. You have to use different gems unless you have the gemling or whatever the name is for the other ascension of the Mercenary. So yeah, Long Shot. And the last one, Innervate, which synergizes well. Again, added damage on killing shocked enemies, so this is great. And basically what it does is also it boosts your other skills, so it's really nice for a few seconds. So all of that is really nice for juicing up your damage. So this is pretty much the skills that I'm using. Let's go talk about the skill tree real quick. And before I do, I'll just mention something about your progression. Say you are in the middle of playing your Path of Exile game and you're thinking about trying this build out. You might wonder, okay, which links should I focus first? Which ones should I add links to as soon as possible? So obviously a Voltaic grenade is the first you want to add links to as soon as possible, because the more links you have, the more damage you'll do with it. And also, don't try and obsess with getting your 6th link as soon as possible on Voltaic Grenade, because if you do, your mana cost is going to jump real quick. So honestly, naturally, when you are supposed to get more links on this gem here, you will feel that it's time for you to do so as well. You'll notice that your mana issues are covered. You don't run into too many mana issues at this point. That's when you know it's a good time to add links, because you won't be facing mana issues. So yeah, Voltaic Grenade is the first one you want to have more links into, and then Shock Burst Rounds definitely would be the close second, and then it would be your Heralds for more damage that you can add in synergies, and then you don't really need that many links for the other ones. Possibly Voltaic Mark, but yeah, so I advise getting your 4 link, 5 link as soon as possible on the Voltaic Grenade. The 6 link can come later. Usually you'll be in maps when you are supposed to do this. Shot Burst Round, same story. Like just 3 link, just a basic combo here. Like the skill and 2 supports is already good. You'll notice that it does like a huge amount of damage. Right now I'm at 5 link, and I'm near the end game. I haven't done like all the pinnacle bosses. I fought one of the pinnacle bosses, and with 5 links I'm doing just fine for now. But I will add another. But yeah, the cost of things has just been crazy. Getting a 6 link right now is like almost 2.7 divines at the moment for buying the perfect jeweler to do so. So it's quite expensive. Passive skill tree. Let's look at that real quick. Obviously I'm running this weapon swap, which means I have a different pathway for my main weapon and a different pathway for my second weapon. But what I want to go through right now is just the bread and butter of the build, the things that make the wheels turn on this build, and give you an idea of what to shoot for, in what order, and if you're in the middle of your gameplay, say you're doing your cruel campaign, you're about to enter maps, or you're in maps, and you wonder what to focus, this will help you out a whole bunch. So let me explain what to do. So basically when you start out, you don't take these 3, you just take these 4 all the way to this. You get this line here as soon as possible, all of this, and then you keep progressing. I took the left path here. You can do that. You can even go through here if you prefer, but you go through here to get this section here. This is your first section that you want to get to, because it'll give you a huge damage boost quite fast and quite soon, along with some much needed stats. In Path of Exile 2, as you progress, there will be 4 main hurdles that you constantly have to deal with and update, right? In Path of Exile 2, a build is never completely final. Let's say you're at level 60, you're not done adjusting your build. You'll probably have to do a little stop and update your build every 20 levels or so. Usually that's the case for me. So let's say you're level 40 right now. Well, when you hit level 60, you'll probably need to do an important weapon upgrade. You'll probably need to tweak your passive skills a little bit, and you'll probably need to update your gem links or whatever. So yeah, every 20 levels. But as you start, the first thing is to get this section here, because it will give you increased damage with 2-handed weapons, namely crossbows. Give you some needed stats, increased area of effect, which is really nice for your build because of the grenades, alongside strength. At the end here, a whole bunch of damage with reduced attack speed, but that doesn't matter because you can compensate later. You can also get this node here. I only removed it because at this point where I am, I need every possible node to travel further, but you can, in the early game, get that node here, no problem. So whenever you get this, the next part you want to get to is as soon as possible, get that wheel here and get every single node in that wheel if possible. You can skip maybe one of the area of effects, but everything else you want here. This will give you an increased grenade fuse duration, which sounds bad, but it gives you also grenade skills fire, an additional projectile, so additional grenades, which is really good because every grenade is like usually about 20-25% more damage, so that's really good. And this here will give you one more cooldown use of every grenade skills, so this is also very, very good, so very important. So as you progress, get this section here, then get this section right here, and as soon as you've gotten this section here, you want to try and make your way to this further section of the tree as soon as possible as well. So you can get, here this will give you some movement speed, but basically what you want to get to as you progress this way is the top section here. It gives you area of effect, area of damage as well, and those 2 lightning nodes here are the first 2 you want to get, which will juice up your Voltaic grenade by a whole lot. So as soon as you get these 2, basically increased chance to shock, damage penetrates lightning resistances, always good. And the other one, lightning damage with non-critical hits, is lucky. So this is really, really important. I'm just going to read out the tooltip here real quick. Lucky things are rolled twice, and the better result is used. So this is really important because, like we mentioned before, the damage pool for lightning damage is very wide, and having this will ensure that your damage is usually rolled in the higher tier, and that makes a big difference in your build. The surrounding nodes are just more lightning damage, so that's good. You've also got these two, which are really nice. Attack damage penetrates enemy elemental resistances, and the other one is increased chance to ignite, freeze, shock, and electrocute buildup. The last two being the more important ones. The first one also a benefit because of Herald of Ash, but yeah, this whole thing here is really good. So you get that as soon as you can, and ignore the little green sections here. If you look at my passive skill tree, the little green sections are my weapon swap. So these are the nodes that are active whenever I swap to my weapon, which I use for my single target. We'll get to that later, but real quick, you get these three here, right? Increased grenade damage and reduced grenade fuse duration. This will help compensate what you got here. So the negative that you got here, you can somewhat compensate here. So very good. So progression order, like this. Get this, go down, get this section real quick, get this one as soon as possible, progress to the top of the tree so you can get these two, can get this section when you need to, area of effect here. And also this area is right next to this section here. I'll show you this star-shaped section here, which helps you cover your attributes. So this might sound stupid, but in the game, I mentioned earlier that there are 4 hurdles that you will have to overcome every 20 levels or so, and those are your attribute requirements, your mana costs, your weapon damage, and I forget the 4th, it will come back to me later. Let's see, what was the 4th? Yeah, it could be your resistances, I suppose. I'll try and remember later, but yeah, those are hurdles. And your attributes can be fixed here, because you can get all attributes. You even get an extra 10% here. You can even get damage off of your attributes if you want to. So I dabbled in this section whenever I was running into attributes problems. There are other ways to solve that, obviously, but since you're building your thing, and it's very dynamic, you don't always have the luxury of having the perfect ring fall on the ground for you to pick up, right? You have to pick and choose. You have to get the upgrades that you can have, that the game drops for you, that the currency that you are currently having can allow you to do. So that's why having this section here can be useful, because if you currently do not have a badass ring with the attributes that you need on it, well, you can compensate here, and later on you can refund those passive points when you don't need them anymore. So this is a very useful section to have. Plus, this section is home to a very juicy section here that deals with killing uniques and rare packs. Again, you'll notice that this section is green. I only use it with my weapon swap. But early on, you can still take a few points in this. Usually you want to have points in this whenever you've started investing in shock burst rounds a bit more, with more links, and you've got a decent weapon swap that you can use. Or if you do not have a weapon swap and just your main weapon, then you can go ahead and spend a few points in here just to juice up your damage against the bosses. These 3 nodes are very important as well. Increased damage with grenades, and this one here, grenades have 15% chance to activate a second time, which is really, really good. Obviously it doesn't proc all the time, but it's very good to have. This green section here is for attack speeds, for the weapon swap. We'll get to that later. So yeah, so this is your progression. You'll notice this section here, which is also very important. So early on, when you've hit those 2 here, and you've gotten some area of effect here, your attributes if you need them here, and this section here, along with the wheel and the cross here, you will go here and progress all the way to Thunderstruck, which is going to give you 50, that's very important, pay attention to this section here, 50% increased electrocute buildup against shocked enemies and 50% increased shock chance against electrocuted enemies. And this is where you get a chance to shock enemies that are currently electrocuted. So normally those 2 synergies don't exist all that much, but with this node here you get a whole lot of it. You can even get those 2 here if you want more clearing, speed, increased chance to shock, and then your shocking hits can have 50% chance to spread to surrounding enemies. There are support gems that do the same thing, but only for 1 skill, whereas this will affect all of your lightning damage. So yeah, useful to have. Right now I removed it because I do not need it anymore. But yes, it's a useful thing to have early on. Yeah, so that's pretty much your early phase. Whenever you get to high-end difficult maps, right, we're talking tier 15, tier 16, 17, 18, juiced up maps. We're talking rare maps that are corrupted, that have like 8, 9, 10 modifiers that are like cancer because they have 3 different damage mods where the enemies do extra critical damage, extra fire damage, or just like crazy amped up maps. This is where you are going to start having to invest into more defense, because the Mercenary has the main downside of being quite squishy, and we don't have access to many life nodes in the skill tree. We don't have access to really strong energy shield nodes unless we travel all the way up to the north side of the tree here. So in that regard, Mercenary is quite at a disadvantage compared to other classes, which is why a solution to this, well, there are a few solutions. One of the solutions is to get the sorcery ward and invest in a whole lot of evasion and armor in order to get that little sorcery ward. The downside that you have to worry about, I'll try and explain it this way so it's simpler to understand. When you're talking about defense in Path of Exile, you're basically looking at your effective health pool. Then you got your physical damage mitigation. Then you've got your elemental damage mitigation, and you could also say that there is chaos damage mitigation. So those are the 4 categories. You could also even add a 5th one, which would be the ailments that affect you. So having ailment immunity or a reduced chance of being affected by negative ailments. Those are your 5 defensive layers. So having the sorcery ward is nice because you can juice it up to have like a shield that constantly recharges, that gives you a barrier of say 2, 3, 4k damage absorption, which in theory sounds nice, but there's a big downside, which is it removes 50% less armor and evasion to begin with, and also it only helps you deal mostly with elemental damage. It does not mitigate physical damage all that well, and there are a lot of bosses and important bosses, pinnacle bosses, stepping stones, where you actually really need to nail that boss fight, right? If you're doing a breach stone and you're fighting the boss at the end, that run costs you 80 exalts, which is a price right now, I think, to buy the breach stone, or you took your time running through a bunch of breaches to get that breach stone, to fight that boss, to get those skill points to spend and get the juicy loot, and you die to that boss, then you pretty much lose all the progression and you have to start over, have to buy another breach stone, and that boss does a whole lot of physical damage, so that barrier here will help you a little bit, but not entirely. So that's why I'm not currently using it. I'm not saying it's 100% bad, but it puts you kind of an awkward position, because one of the very efficient way to deal with physical damage mitigation with the Witch Hunter, the Mercenary, is actually stuff like this chest piece here. Cloak of Flame, which basically takes 40% of all incoming physical damage, and it's taken as fire damage instead. So this helps a lot with mitigating physical damage. There's also a little note here in the passive skill tree that does something somewhat similar but not as strong. Here 5% of physical damage from hits taken is taken as a random element instead. So that's the kind of stuff that helps compensate for the fact that the Mercenary does not have a huge bunch of armor or a huge bunch of evasion, especially if he's running Sorcery Rod. He's got 50% less of those things. So physical damage mitigation is very important for a Mercenary. One could say that you can invest like crazy into armor or evasion to give yourself layers, but all of these are imperfect, because if you look at your effective health pool, you got your life, you got your energy shield, and that you got armor that basically reduces incoming damage if it's physical. You've got elemental damage mitigation through your resistances here, right? Which again mitigate some of the incoming damage. But when you're talking like armor and evasion, armor reduces the incoming damage. Evasion helps you have chances of evading or dodging completely an attack. But here's the thing. No matter how much evasion you have, unless you have 100% of everything, the hit will eventually come through. And if it's a hard-hitting hit of like 4K or whatever, or even more, well, doesn't matter if you have a whole bunch of evasion, you're eventually going to get hit and die. Same with the armor. If you have a whole bunch of armor, that's great. It's going to mitigate some of the incoming damage, but eventually, well, there's a portion of that damage that comes through. So having different sources of mitigation will help you survive. And the reason I'm talking about this is because of this section I've traveled to here for your late game. So you can skip ahead if you don't need to look at your late game section right now because you're not currently in the late game or mapping. But if you are in mapping, late game, listen to this part and then you can continue on to the next part. So as you progress in your skill tree, all the way up here, you can get access to a little 3% of increased maximum life, which is quite needed, I'd say. But most importantly, this section here, which will give you all elemental resistances, but most importantly, +1 to all maximum elemental resistances, alongside the same thing surrounding that node here, right? So basically, you can get an extra 3 overcapped resistance to all your elemental resistances, and that helps a whole lot to deal with damage that is incoming. So with the Cloak of Flame, I added 3 sockets here, or runes. Not runes, sorry, it's actually, I forget the name of this thing. It comes from Ultimatum. But yeah, soul cores, there you go. So the soul cores here add to maximum fire resistance. And that's even more important considering that now 40% of the physical damage is being taken as fire damage. So higher fire resistance, usually your resistances are capped at 75 maximum. So let's say the gray number is 100% and you've got 75% on the left. What it means is despite you having 100% fire resistance on your gear, you're only limited to 75 fire resistance at the moment, because that's the cap that the game gives you, meaning you only mitigate 70%. Well, we have a barrier at 75%. With these 3 extra, and the ones I'm getting from the jewels and the passive skill tree here, I'm all the way up to 85% for fire damage, which really synergizes well with this Cloak of Flame. And then I've got 80% for my lightning and cold damage, and that helps me deal with those really difficult maps where I need mitigation and defense layers. So this is why you travel to that part of the tree, and while you're at it, right next to this little section is a very fun part to go to, which is here. Primal Growth. So this section here you get more AoE and even more AoE here, and this is just really great for your build because the more AoE you have, the better you can handle those breaches and very thick, dense maps where there are a lot of mobs to deal with. So while you're at it, you can go here. Obviously, if you're not in this section of the tree, you're earlier in your progression, you can get this node here with distilled emotions on your amulet. So this is something you could put on your amulet for not too expensive early on for a nice AoE upgrade, or you can get it when you're close to it because you've traveled this far for your defenses later on in the game if you want to. So this is my current situation right now. So this is why we travel to this part. So here you have a really good look at the passive skill tree. I will include in the video description probably tomorrow a Maxwell build guide or build page where you can look at the skill tree. I might even put a section for your different levels at which you want to have your points spent, and I will do something like that also for the skill gems. I don't know that I will do the same for the gear right now, but I will talk about the gear in this video. So I think I've covered pretty efficiently the skills, the passive skill tree. When we talk about the weapon swap, I won't go into too much detail right now. I'll put it on the description in the link so you can go look at it in more detail, but I'll just say this. The idea is that whenever you're progressing through your campaign, your mapping and whatever, you'll often get crossbows or weapon upgrades that are quite similar. You'll often get a crossbow that does about the same amount of damage that you have right now with your current crossbow. And whenever that happens, instead of selling the crossbow, keep it, put it in your offhand or second weapon swap, so that you can invest in your skill tree, because by default you will end up after the campaign, cruel campaign I think, with 24 points that you can allow or you can allocate for your main weapon and also for your offhand weapon without complicating things too much. Basically what you want to do is have your second weapon have a whole bunch of attack speed, because what you want to do is whenever you cast your Voltaic grenades, as you notice here, when I do that, automatically I am using my main crossbow. Whenever I'm starting to use the shock burst rounds, right, as soon as I do that, it loads up my other crossbow, which has more attack speed, and all my passive skill points that I spent around attack speed and other useful nodes. And because of that, Whenever I do this, I don't have to think about it myself. The passive nodes will reallocate by themselves automatically. I'll show you what I mean. Passive skill tree is opened, and I'm going to swap weapons. And as you notice, see, the passive skill tree updates by itself, and it will use the points that I specified for this weapon. So this is really amazing, because what it means is whenever you start unloading with your shot burst rounds, you will be doing even more optimal damage, and that is super deadly and super satisfying. I will showcase in the end of this video a little bit of a gameplay, and you'll see exactly how this build is just amazing, and it kicks ass, and it's fun, it's engaging, it's like so much more fun. I love it. And if you have comments about the build, ideas, or if you've tried it and you have comments, I'd be happy to hear what you thought about the build. So let's continue talking about the weapon swap, or really briefly actually. So all of those green sections in my tree, so right here, here, those 3 on the left I believe, this section here, and the 3 starting area right here, all give me more attack speed and focused damage for that skill. Synergizes really, really well, and that is part of the reason why I've got so much attack speed with this weapon right now. And I'm probably going to achieve even higher attack speed later on, but right now this is more than efficient. And remember, the proper way to use your shock burst rounds, so just a small parenthesis here to talk about this. Whenever you use your shock burst rounds, you want to start shooting without using the emergency reload if possible. Okay? Just a little bit, maybe empty a whole clip into the enemy or half a clip. And halfway through, you click on the emergency reload, which for me is the R button. So you reload, and what it does, it instantly reloads your whole clip, adds damage to it, and the fact that you had a few bullets to reload also procs your support gem that we mentioned before, which is fresh clip. So having fresh clip plus emergency reload right in the middle of you shooting makes your 5-second window longer, less chances of you reloading during that 5-second, and makes this section of you dishing out damage just insane. It's going to be just fun to do. So yep, we've covered the passive skill tree pretty much completely. The rest will be in the link. Now let's move on to part 3, which is your gear. So this is also very important. For this part, I'm just going to open up my inventory and show you basically what you want to look at. And I'm going to explain this from the perspective of you being anywhere in the game, whereas be it at the middle of the game, cruel campaign, or the mapping or whatever, this will be a section you want to listen to for you to be able to use the right gear. So very simple. Your most important part in this whole section here is your weapon. At all times, this is your most important upgrade. This is the most important item that you want to focus on. So whenever you have extra currency laying around, I'm not saying upgrade your weapons every 5 levels, but what I want to say is whenever you feel like you're hitting a wall, and you'll notice it right away, you're progressing through the campaign, progressing through the mapping, and you notice that all of a sudden your damage could be higher, right? You're not clearing as fast, struggling to kill the unique bosses, whatever. That's a signal for you to go out and buy yourself a new weapon or craft yourself a new weapon. Most of the time, I'd say half of the time, the upgrade will come from you dropping the weapon in your maps or whatever. But the other half of the time, you'll be buying a weapon probably. But whenever you feel like this is the time to do it, this is your most important item. Let's look at what the item should look like. The most important part are the prefixes, I'd say, along with one of the suffixes. I'll explain why. So in the prefixes, if you look at the weapon description right here, I'm just going to move this window actually. I'm going to pin it, move it here. Okay. So if you look at the weapon right here, you'll notice that in the prefixes you have flat damage, flat physical damage. Right here adds X number of physical damage. This is really important. The higher the better, and you want that to be paired with increased physical damage percentage. And if you're lucky, you can even get 2 times physical damage percentage. Usually it will be a hybrid stat. Hybrid meaning that that prefix, or that specific prefix, will come along with another little stat like life, like a hybrid life, hybrid accuracy, or whatever. But basically that's what you want to look for in your prefixes. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. You could end up having flat fizz, percentage fizz, and elemental, or some flat fire damage added. Whatever source of flat damage you can get on top of that physical percentage is good, but basically the most important part is that number right here, the physical damage. You want that number to be as high as possible. Right now you'll notice that my number here for where I'm at in the game is not even that high. There are crossbows that do like 500, 600, 700 damage in that environment for the physical damage, but this crossbow still kicks ass because of this line right here. I've got +7 to level of all projectile skills, which cranks up your damage by quite a bit as well. So you're looking for flat fizz. That's what your most important thing with fizz percentage. So that number here is quite high, or as high as possible. Then you're looking at having plus level to all projectile skills. This would be the second most important focus. And then you've got luxury. Luxury would be attacks per second through attack speed in your suffixes. It could be attributes that you need, like strength and dexterity. It could also be sustain, so like mana gained on kill, or life on kill, or life on hit, or stuff like that, or mana leech, or life leech. All of those can be useful. You can feel it out for yourself. You'll know where your build is currently struggling, because every time that you advance in your progression with your character, you will know which hurdle you're currently fighting with. Oftentimes you'll be at a step where you notice that currently your main challenge is mana. Well, that's when you know that in your weapon, if you find a weapon that's decent, good price, whatever, or you crafted something that's good enough, and you notice that between two weapons that are similar, one has a big solution for your mana problems, so I'll definitely go for that one for now, even if it means having slightly less damage for that part, because mana can be important at times. So this is pretty much what the weapon should look like. And then you have rune slots that you can put even more physical percentage damage into, which is what you'll be running most of the time. If you're lucky, you can even attempt corrupting your weapon to get a third rune slot for another 20% physical damage increase. I haven't done that with my weapon yet. I have not dared breaking that crossbow yet, so but I might eventually when I get a similar weapon. When I did get a similar weapon, I got this one here. My main weapon is here. And my second weapon is this one. So when I got this one, I used it for my offhand. So notice that this one also has the same criteria. Flat physical damage, I've got some flat cold damage, somewhat decent physical percentage damage. I've got some attack speed on it, +2 level of projectile skills, again a very good source of damage. And I've got life on enemy killed, so it gives you an idea for the weapon. This is the most important item. You want to focus on this at all times, so like every time your build struggles in terms of damage, you go back and you upgrade your weapon. Then the second most important part will probably be your attributes and life and mana on your gear. Life and mana is really, really important because this build does not have access to much ways of increasing your effective health pool. So your energy shield and your health pool can be increased by having obviously life and mana, or life and energy shield, whatever. But mana is really important because your skills are going to cost quite a bit of mana because of all the links and stuff like that. So on most of the gear, if you look at it from, we'll start with the gloves. You'll notice I have some flat damage as a prefix, life, mana, attack speed, resistances, and some leech on the gloves here. They're not even perfect. The base is not even perfect for this item either, but it's decent enough. The most important part is here, and the most important part is max life, max mana, resistances if you need them, flat damage if you can get it, sure, especially if it's physical damage. Leech is fine, but the most important part, life, mana, and then your resistances. Same with the boots. Obviously the boots you want movement speed, but then what you want is life, mana possibly, or resistances. In this case I've got life and resistances. I was lucky, I corrupted it and got an extra fire resistance on the boots. Most of your gear should be armor and evasion based, but exemptions can be made. Doesn't matter too much for now. The rings, same thing, life and mana, resistances. The rings I find are a very good a good place to look for either damage if you need it or resistances, but most of the time I like to have a whole bunch of resistance on my rings if possible, because the rings are often the item that you're not moving around too much. Usually in Path of Exile, you're not upgrading your rings every 5 seconds. So it's good to have a solid base of resistances and also attributes and stuff like that, life, mana, on your rings. That way, whenever the other parts of your gear are moving around, you know, upgrading your gloves, upgrading your boots, as they will, when that happens, sometimes you'll be trading off a stat. You'll get like a perfect pair of boots, right? But that has a lot of fire res, which you don't need, which you already have, or the opposite, superb pair of boots, but that drops your cold resistance by too much, and you end up needing resistance. So if you've got a really good base of resistances on your rings, it helps you cycle through those upgrades on your other pieces of gear. So if you look at the ring, life, mana, dexterity, 2 resistances, and the implicit, which is lightning resistance, some fire damage, works with the Herald of Ash, so that's cool. The other ring has an additional skill slot, not even good for me, but the reason why I have this ring is because of the fact that I could get it for a decent price with decent stats on it. So not perfect by any means, but life, mana, some intelligence that was needed, all res, cold res, all of this together makes for a okay ring. I haven't upgraded everything to the max, just to give you an idea of what to focus on. The amulet here is quite good, actually. The amulet has a implicit of life, flat life, percentage life, a huge number of mana, which is great, dexterity attribute, all res, and then some life regen, which is a low roll. So it's no perfect amulet by far, but it's a very good amulet. Paid 100 Exile for it, so a decent purchase. There are certainly better amulets. A perfect godly amulet would look like this, but it would have +2 skills, +2 projectile skills. There are amulets that can roll between, I think, 1 to 3. So in that department, so that's an extra source of damage you could get. So life regen is nice, but it's not needed. The most important part on your amulet is probably the life part, because once you add catalysts to it, you can get a whole bunch of life, which will help you mitigate and get a better health pool. And the helmet here, same thing, life, mana. Some rarity. Obviously rarity right now is tied to better loot, but whenever you progress in your build, I'd say don't go crazy stressing out about the rarity. If you find a really nice upgrade gear piece, even if it doesn't have great rarity on it, I'd still use it, because you really have to tackle those hurdles, right? If you're struggling with mana, you get your mana on your gear, even if it means dropping some rarity. So this helmet here has chaos res, rarity, lightning res, again the most important part, life and mana, and then I added some extra increased maximum life in the socket, the rune socket. So there you go for the gear, pretty much. I forgot to cover the belt. Same story, life, mana, triple res, double res actually. Yeah, this one I went for the chaos res rather than the perfect triple trifecta resistances. So it's not a perfect belt. I haven't corrupted it, anything like that yet, but it gives you an idea of what to look for, and then your charm, whatever you need, whatever resistance is lacking, or whatever good charm you were able to find for potions, for flasks. Ideally, you want something that gains charges every second. That way, if you're in an extended fight or you have to relocate, reposition, you're gaining charges even when you're not fighting, or even if you're not killing anything or damaging anything. So that's really good. The first line there is not as important. You can use something else, but the second line is quite useful. So that pretty much covers the gear, and then the Cloak of Flame we mentioned before, so that's okay. You can use something different in the beginning. You only kind of really start needing to look at solutions such as this chest piece here and other things when you hit the really juicy maps that will really tax this build to the maximum and stress it out. That's when you'll need to look at other defensive solutions. So we've covered the skill gems and support gems. We've covered the passive skill tree. We've covered the gear you need to use. About the gear, I will just give a quick word about how to get some of those upgrades. Basically, on the trade side, if you look at PoE's trade side, you can search for gear and always be aware that there's always someone willing to sell for a decent price. You do not have to go out and spend crazy amounts, right? Just to give you a quick idea of how much I spent on the gear, obviously I've got, I want to say, probably like 20 or 25 divines worth of investment now that I've come all this way, but you can get an early mapping with almost no investment at all. I spent 65 divines on my previous weapon before having this one, It was a similar weapon to this, just a bit less damage. I spent, as you know, 100 exalts on this amulet, but before that I had an amulet that I spent like 10 exalts on. So you don't have to go crazy. The rings I crafted myself or dropped myself. The boots I think I bought just for having the movement speed. Yeah, with decent rolls, and it's not even the perfect pair of boots. So. Same with the gloves. They were super cheap, like 20 exalts or something like that. The belt was supposed to be, I think, a divine orb, but I got it for like, I think 85 exalts or something like that. So you look for the stuff you want, and as you try and make your upgrades, what you want to focus on is mostly your weapon, and then getting the stuff that you are lacking as much as possible. And there are tricks to compensating. So like, you don't have to have the perfect pair of gloves, but oftentimes what you want to do is just get something that's good and compensate with the other item. So don't look at your upgrades as just a single item. You're stressing out for just that one item. Remember that as you purchase the first upgrade, sometimes the second upgrade will give you whatever's missing. So I wouldn't stress out too much. You're going to get what you need. One piece of advice for your gear would just be to dump every expert crossbow you come across, or even advanced crossbows, into a stash here. Okay. The reason for doing this is whenever it's full, you go to that stash and you pull out your crossbows and you try to transmute them, augment them, hoping to get a lucky prefix roll that we mentioned before, a flat fizz percentage. And if you do get that, then you regall, right? Regall your weapon, and then you continue by slamming with exalts if you continue being lucky. And oftentimes you'll craft yourself a decent weapon that way. And don't get discouraged if you do not get lucky. You don't have to invest a whole bunch of currency. You only invest currency if the starting steps of your crossbows are good, and you keep your missed crossbows in the stash here. Whenever you have 3 of the same base and the same rarity, you can go to your reforging bench, which you'll get access to, I believe, in I think it's Act 2 Cruel, or even before that. And you can put 3 crossbows of the same type, base type, same rarity, reforge, and you'll get a brand new crossbow. ID it, and if you're lucky, it will be better than 3 that you threw away. So instead of selling your crossbows to the vendor or throwing them on the ground, you keep it in the stash, and whenever you have 3, you'll reforge. And believe you me, sometimes you'll get a very decent upgrade that way. I sure did at least 3 times. So yeah, it's a repetitive thing to do, but it saves you a whole bunch of currency, and it doesn't cost too much time either. So for an example here, I'm going to go and see if I can buy a crossbow real quick to show you what I mean. Crossbows, here's a blue crossbow. I'm not going to invest a whole bunch of currency in this one because the vendor only sells, in my case, items that are item level 60, but I'm going to use this as an example of what I mean. Oh yeah, it's not even going to work because of the bases that I've kept. But yeah, suppose you have 3 blue crossbows like this. You just reforge them, and you get sometimes a better item. Now let's talk about how to use your currency and not waste it on trying to get a crossbow upgrade without spending crazy amounts. Because you can easily get a 3, 4, 5, 6 divine crossbow without investing too much currency. So what you want to do is you get a good base, say an expert crossbow. You'll notice that I'm using crossbows that do not have the base that I am looking for. The best base would be this one, Expert Bombard Crossbow, which gives you an extra grenade, which is 20% more damage essentially. Yeah, so this would be best, but I have not been able to hit this kind of stats on this kind of item yet. They are out there, but they are super expensive. They're all like 100 divines and upwards for me at the step that I'm at right now. So I keep doing it until I hit it, and eventually I will hit it. But I've gotten some really decent weapon upgrades using this technique here. So let's show you what we do. Suppose you drop a white crossbow, expert diet crossbow, or expert bombard crossbow, and it's white or it's blue. If it's white, you take it up to your stash, you put it here, and what you do, you either if you have a bunch of essences of torment, you can use one and make it into a magic item. It will go from white to magic item with a guaranteed physical modifier or affix. If you're unlucky, it will be something like physical leech, but if you're lucky, you'll get flat fizz or physical percentage damage. If the number is decent, if the tier, if you notice here at the right of your item, if you get physical flat and the tier is high, say tier 7 or tier 8, what you can do then is augment with an augmentation orb, obviously, your weapon, hoping to get another fizz stat, right? So let's say you got flat fizz, you augment, and you get, say, fizz percentage with your fizz flat. This is really good. And if that happens, you can regal orb, hoping to get even more good stuff on your crossbow. If you roll into something bad, you just take the crossbow back into its stash here and leave it there until you get 3 of the same base type and rarity, and then you can reforge, right? So white crossbow, go here, transmute, augment, or Essence of Torment, augment, which is cheap. Or if you're rich, which is often not the case, you can Essence of Torment into greater Essence of Torment, but this essence here by itself is worth like 50 exalts. So I wouldn't waste your precious hardened currency on just any crossbow. So just do what I just said here, right? Essence of Torment or transmute, augment, and eventually you get lucky. Eventually you do get lucky and you get a decent roll. Sometimes it's not perfect, but it's a decent roll and it beats your current weapon, and then you can start regaling, exalting your weapon, and you can get really lucky, and then you can start socketing your weapon by using Artificer's Orbs, and then you add your runes and you got yourself a really decent weapon upgrade. So let's take a look at this real quick. As an example of when you don't want to keep investing currency into the item, despite the item having some of the things you're looking for. So this is a good example. This was a white item. When I transmuted the item, I got the +2 to all projectile skills. So that was good enough for me to want to augment the item, so I augmented, and I got the physical percentage roll that you see here. Now this is very important. Sometimes you might get a fizz percentage roll onto your crossbow. You'll see it and you'll think it's a bad roll because it's a rather lower number compared to the other affix that rolls fizz percentage. But the hybrid fizz percentage, when you look at hybrid fizz, sometimes you might get hybrid fizz with accuracy rating, and the roll might not be all that great, but you still have an open prefix, right? So if you're lucky, you can get flat fizz, fizz percentage with accuracy rating, which is a hybrid. Maybe the roll isn't that great, tier 4, tier 3, something like that. And then you can regal and potentially get a really fat fizz percentage as your last prefix. So when to stop investing currency, that's very simple. This one started out with the projectile skills. Then I got into the hybrid physical percentage damage, and then I exalted and got a let's see what it was. I think it was another accuracy roll, was it? Yeah, I got another accuracy roll. At this point, you've got 2 options. You can stop investing into the crossbow, put it away, or you can try to use a Chaos Orb on it, but Chaos Orbs are worth 3 exalts each, so you have to consider it. And if you use your Chaos Orb onto the weapon, if you're lucky, it removes the accuracy rating and exchanges it for what you're looking for, but it could also put a suffix that you don't want. It could remove one of the affixes you currently want to keep, so it's very random. Right now, crafting in PoE2 is very difficult, very frustrating, which is why this formula here of stashing your crossbows and just doing it over and over again, it eventually works out and it gives you a really nice upgrade, and you don't have to spend too much currency on your crossbow. So just to conclude this section about crossbows, this crossbow as an example, when I got to the 3rd roll and it was bad, I just decided to stash it away because I didn't think it was worth chaos orbing. If my mods here had been really high, say +6 to all projectile skills or +5, right? And I had a hybrid roll that was higher, potentially 75% fizz damage on the hybrid roll, then yeah, I would consider using the Chaos Orb or continue to Exile because I've got some really solid stats that are already there, and all I need is 1 more to make the item almost near perfect for me. So this gives you an idea. So you keep them around because even though it might not be the perfect base, it might not be the bombard crossbow of your dreams, a expert diet crossbow with the right stats can kick ass, you know. So those 2 crossbows that I'm using right now, They're not perfect, but they do the job, despite not having the exact base that I would like to use. So that covers everything I wanted to say about the gear. And I'm going to conclude this video just by running a map real quick so you can see what the build looks like, how fun it is for me to play. And you also see the weaknesses and the strength of the build as I fight. So I'm just going to go and find myself a map to run. Now obviously this is not showing you what the build looks like when I'm level 60 doing cruel maps, because my character is currently further along, but it's going to give you a look at what the skills are, and I'll stop and make some comments about how I fight with this build and why I find it fun to use. So I'm currently here. Yep, this is good. Delirium is a good test, so we're going to go run the Delirium. Oh, can I? No, I haven't completed this map yet, I think. Okay, we'll use another one just to showcase the build. Let's find ourselves a decent map. It's going to take me a few seconds. Yeah, this is good enough. A breach with irradiation. Okay. Yeah, this should be a good example. So this will be a breach with higher level. The map gives enemies extra fire damage and projectiles, so I should be tested a little bit with this map, but not too much, just enough for you guys to see what it looks like. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and run this map, and we'll stop towards the third of the progression of the map to make some comments real quick, and then I'll conclude the video, and I will add the links in the description so you guys can go and look at the passive skill tree in more detail, as well as the links, gem links. So I just shoot my grenades, shocks everything, one-shots almost everything except for rare mobs and some blue mobs, depending on how juicy the map is. And your Atlas skills also affect the toughness of the enemy sometimes in the mods. So I'm going to move around. There's a shrine here that is giving me some trouble. I'm just going to go and click on it. There you go. So as you noticed, the downside of this build is the squishiness. The upside is the incredible damage and the single target damage as well. The versatility, mobility, and the fun factor too. Those white circles that you see on the ground is me, was the Ascension, basically I forget the name, but it's a thing that does explosions based off of 100% of the life of the enemy that died to the surrounding enemies. So grenades, the enemies get electrocuted, and the Herald of Ash clears everything around it pretty much. I'm going to try and find a rare pack so you can see what I do when I do come across one. You'll notice that I'm very respectful of the enemies. I always keep my distance. I dodge roll, sometimes to engage, sometimes to disengage. There's a rare pack. He's already electrocuted. So I didn't even have time to... Yeah, there you go. So what I do is I shock them or electrocute them, and then I swap to the single target, which is the shot burst rounds. As it so happens, this map here might not be juicy enough for me to be able to show you the single target damage, because they die too quickly right now from my stuff. But yeah, I should have another example or another chance of showing you what it looks like. So for mana, whenever I run into mana issues, or like I'm running out of mana, I'll pop a potion, and I also get mana on kill currently from my weapon. So that sustains me enough that I don't need to worry about the mana too much. Very rarely do I really run out of mana. So as you can see, this clears almost everything comfortably. Tier 15 map, well, tier 16 actually, because of the irradiation, and everything gets pretty much one shot. Okay, here's a rare pack. I didn't get the chance to single target him, but basically what happens when I do the breach later on in this map, that is when I'll have a chance to use it probably and show you what it looks like, and also when I'm doing a boss. So I think maybe after this map I will go straight to a boss just to really showcase that single target damage thing. So I'm going to pause the game real quick just to say one thing. So this build is really good for damage, clearing, it's fun. It's not perfect by any means. It's not one of the broken builds right now that need to be nerfed. It's balanced. But when I say that it's a squishy build, well, yes, because of the way that the Mercenary is built, but you have solutions around that. So notice how this map, the enemies have extra damage, right? Plus it's a +1, so it's a tier 16 map. And as you can see, there's enough danger in this map that I have to be careful. I'm not reckless. I'm not jumping in the face of every enemy I come across. So I keep my distance. I dodge roll. I'm prudent, and I probably won't die in this map unless I get really unlucky or do something stupid. But most of the time, it's okay. If I'm running a really dangerous map, say a map that has like 3 damage mods on the map, plus it's got delirium, plus it's got like a whole bunch of cancerous other things. That's when I have to be even more extra prudent, and that's when you start needing to invest in those other things that help you. So currently, the build where it's at deals really well with physical damage mitigation. The one thing that I still struggle with a little bit is the elemental damage mitigation, despite my investment in the extra resistances. The health pool is quite low. Getting messages, sorry. Yeah, so 2.7k life approximately right now with a little bit of energy shield, so not a big health pool by any means. And my items could have higher max life on them. They do have decent rolls, but I could have more. So all that to say that with this build, it's very fun, very engaging, but you don't play recklessly. So here's the breach. Should give us a chance to look at the shot burst rounds a bit more, possibly. I'm just going to set up real quick. So earlier I was talking about the ballistas. Ah, there you see. I don't even have a chance to showcase the single target because they died too quickly. Okay, so when I know I'm about to engage a fight that is more dangerous, say a boss or whatever, this is not the case here, but I'm just going to show you. I will lay down the ballistas, use the Hailstorm rounds if I need to, so I can activate it and proc some passive damage. So this should cause the computer to lag a little bit, but we're going to have fun. See, electrocuted. I just pull out the single target damage. These guys are not high health enough for me to do it for a long time, but you get an idea. All right. There you go. So that's the one downside I find with Path of Exile 2 is seeing all the mathematical calculations that the game has to do during big fights like this. The game lags a bit during those heavy instances, so I hope that they optimize it even better to where you can do those big juicy fights without all the lag. Okay. So because the dodge roll makes you invulnerable for a very short time, what I like to do is I usually throw out my grenades and I dodge roll right after throwing them to give me some like invulnerability for a few seconds. Oh nice, another breach. And I also do that whenever I need to disengage. Like I'll throw my grenades, back off, and relocate. That gives me a bit more defense. It helps me stay alive. And the time I spend dodge rolling is the time that the grenades fuse last usually. So by the time I'm out of my dodge roll, I get the damage, and I'm ready to jump on the enemy. Here we go. Wow, they're just too squishy. I really want to show you guys the single target with shock burst rounds, but they're dying way too fast. Let's see. I think my think is on performance, yeah, so I should be fine. I'm probably lagging a little bit from also streaming, but okay, so we're gonna do this one more breach here, and I'll try and really pay attention to one of the rare mobs being electrocuted so I can like really unload onto them. There you go. They die too quickly. Oh, there you go. So what I did is I activated the emergency reload onto that rare pack. Oh. I don't know if there's a unique that helps with unit collision. That would be really great if I could find a way to just walk through enemies more efficiently, because sometimes they prevent me from going where I want. Okay, I missed that last rare guy, but as you can see, I can handle the content pretty good. Tier 16 map, no too much trouble. I can do bosses fine as well. I did the first 3 Breachstone bosses fine as well. But yeah, sometimes on rare occasions I can die to like mispositioning or a stupid mistake in a boss fight, but honestly it's very decent. At this point in the game, for myself, my main 2 concerns, my main 2 upgrades I need to do is upgrading my weapon once more, because I'm due for a weapon upgrade, and I need to get even more damage mitigation so I can do the juiced up content more, because some of the really dangerous maps can test my build a bit more sometimes, which is why I'm currently investing in those things. There you go. So the advantage of this build is you're very mobile. You can relocate. He's electrocuted. Let's unload. There you go. Rare pack dead. Very satisfying. I love that attack speed with that skill. So much fun. Especially against bosses, yeah. Here's another. I can't even do the shock burst. They die before I can even touch him. Well, I'm heading back. I think we covered everything in this map pretty much. Okay. I really wish you guys could see the what it looks like with a boss fight. Yeah, I'll do a map with a boss fight. So feel free to skip the next 2-3 minutes to get the boss fight if you just want to see the boss fight. I'm going to run another map that has a boss in it, so we can see that. That way you'll get to see the shock burst rounds in action a bit more. I was expecting that map to be a bit more challenging. Okay. Boss fights. Is there one nearby? I must have one somewhere. There's one here, but there's a few maps in between. There must be one somewhere. There's one here. This one is not too far off. I guess I could get to it quickly. I think that's my closest one, actually. I do a lot of bossing, so... Yeah. Ah! There's one right here. I wish I had one at the ready right now, but I think this is the closest one. So I'm gonna run this delirium map real quick and get to the boss afterwards. So you get to see 2 more maps. I'm just gonna ID this one real quick. Corrupted. I corrupt every map. I always make them rare and then corrupt them in the hopes of getting tier 16 maps pretty much. Since I want this to go fast, I'm going to run a blue map for the first one. Bleed on hit. Okay, that should be fine. So I'll try and clear this map as fast as possible so I can do the boss map so you guys can see what it looks like with bosses. Ooh. Yeah, the lag of Delirium and Breaches. The game just doesn't like Breach and Delirium all that much for performance. Yeah, it's lagging a bit. It's a rare. So see how whenever I'm facing those rare guys, I just pull out the shock burst rounds and I burst them. I melt them down pretty much. If my Voltaic grenades have not killed them already. Yeah, sorry about the game lagging a little bit. There you go. Ooh, lots of rares in this one. Also, it's important to notice that the Voltaic grenade does not just have a offensive component, but it's also very defensive in the sense that it electrocutes so many enemies that all these guys that are electrocuted will not be attacking you. So that's also very good in terms of defense in that regard. Probably perfection in this build would be a way to incorporate Herald of Ice, because Herald of Ice tends to travel more. You can clear like an entire section of the map with Herald of Ice. One of the dangers of using shock burst rounds is whenever you've got your rare elite pinned down and you want to unload on him, sometimes the surrounding enemies or status effects, say fire on the ground, bleeding on the ground, poison on the ground, stuff like that can get you, because while you're busy unloading your single target damage, you can get killed by those things if you're not careful. So be careful not to become greedy with shock burst rounds. It's so satisfying and it's so fun to use. Sometimes you'll just lock yourself into using it when it's not the right time to use it, or when there's clear danger around you. So you want to unload onto the boss or the rare pack, but it's not safe to do so right away. So do not get tempted if it's not the right moment, because it can cost you your life in that moment. Okay, let's find the remaining rare packs. Oh, there's one. Yeah, these guys are a bit tougher. It's an impressive map. Delirium is really different than most other map themes. The enemies are definitely stronger in Delirium. So this map is not very dense right now, so obviously my clear is not as fast, because the lack of enemy presence means my AoE does not hit as many targets. There you go. Love it when it's dense like that, because they all die.
Incoming! Not yet.
Oh. Yeah. I'm just gonna exit the smoke despite losing the buff. Oh, oh. See, that lightning damage hurt me. But I managed to live. See, expert crossbow. I will pick all of them up. Blue, white, rare, whatever. I take them. So notice that I saw the rare pack. I instantly applied the Voltaic mark on him, and as soon as he got electrocuted, I unloaded shock burst rounds on him. There's still some rare packs somewhere. I think they're at the south part here, yeah. There we go. There you go. Map cleared. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. So when I exit a map, I usually dump the crossbows in my little stash here. Don't even look at them. I look at them later. I also dump the currencies. So the rings I'll look at later. Let's do the other map right away. Okay, a boss. Ooh, that is nasty. Minus maximum player resistances. I don't like that. Monsters have chance to bleed. Okay, this is probably a good way for me to die. I'll probably die, I suppose, because I'm exaggerating the amount of risk I'm taking, but I am going to do it anyways, just to get a chance to really showcase shock burst rounds a bit more. Oh yeah, I just remembered from looking at this map that the boss in this map is Cancer. He's one of the worst, most dangerous bosses. Yeah, good chance that I might die, but at least you guys will get some entertainment. Let's get that shrine if we can. There we go. Okay, this shrine I got should help me. That was a rare, I think. Okay, here I sense that there are probably a bunch of enemies, so I'm going to put some turrets on. Oh, there was a delay. That's another thing I want to get in my passive skill tree, weapon swap speed, so I can do the shock burst swap faster. I do lose like a second or so whenever I swap. Okay, this one was tougher. He's probably got some elemental resistances. Yeah, he did. Okay. Okay. See, so I'm about to start this fight with the Essence guy. They are usually very dangerous. He's got additional projectiles. He unleashes ice, which is probably dangerous for me. Periodic cold explosions. So this tells me I don't want to be anywhere near this guy. It's probably going to be a dangerous fight. So I'm going to set up those ballistas. I'll shoot the Hellstorm rounds. I'll get the heck out of there, and I'll take him from a distance. So, Hailstorm rounds. Turret number 1. Turret number 2, I will back out this way, and I will get out of there as soon as possible. He's currently electrocuted. Normally I would have used shock burst rounds, but I was busy looking at the incoming enemies and making sure I keep my distance with this guy. So yeah, with this build, it's a lot of fun, very engaging, very creative. You get to use your brain a lot. But you have to be respectful of the build. You have to be considerate of the fact that you're not a tank at all. So you're kind of a glass cannon, but a very mobile and fun glass cannon. So yeah, just gotta make sure you respect your enemies and you'll be fine. Ah yes, give me that shrine. Oh, that hurt. I don't know what that was, but that hurt.
Not yet. No mana.
Yeah, I suspect the boss might get me. We'll see. Good. The boss should be nearby. Yeah, there he is. That boss does like a rain of arrows type of attack thing, which is really dangerous. Hopefully he does not have an aura. I'm just going to kill his 2 lieutenants. There you go. Waiting for my mana to be ready. So in this fight, I should have time to set up the turrets, but I don't think I'll have time to set up the Hellstorm round. So my priority will be putting the turrets on, marking him, and electrocuting him as soon as possible. Here goes. There, shocked. So, oh, that rain of arrows, yep. That usually gets me. Oh, that hurt. Oh, wow. Oh, he's angry now. There you go. So in boss fights, I sometimes run out of mana a bit more, because I don't get to get a whole bunch of mana on kill from killing all the mobs around him. But if I'm careful in the way that I spend my skills, I'm usually okay. So basically what I want to do is marking him, Voltaic grenade him with a slow pace, get the electrocution build up. As soon as he's electrocuted, I can unload with the shock burst rounds. You'll notice that in this fight, I sometimes use the shock burst rounds despite the boss not being electrocuted. The fact that he's currently shocked is enough for the shock burst rounds to get the damage boost that they get if the enemy is under an electrical ailment at the moment. So obviously that was the case a few times in this fight. So as you can see from looking at this fight, the main need of my build right now, or my character at this point, is I'm due for a weapon upgrade, obviously. My damage is super decent enough to clear all the trash, most of the rare packs, but I'm lacking a little bit of that oomph in terms of like single target damage, just because my weapon is a bit overdue for an upgrade, which I'll explain what I mean by this in a second. I'm just going to clear these guys. Yeah. 4 tier 15 maps. That was a decent drop. Yeah. Okay. So I'll show you what I mean with the weapon. So my current weapon has a level requirement of level 77. Most of the time, like obviously there's an item level, but most of the time when you drop gear and stuff like that, your item level should somewhat follow the level that you're at. And usually whenever your weapon is like almost 15 to 20 levels behind your current level, that is when you really need to have a weapon upgrade. So if you look at my current level, I'm level 91, and this weapon is a level 77 weapon, so it's starting to be due for an upgrade. Same with the other weapon here. So right now I should have the same exact kind of weapon, but with a higher DPS. Same thing, but something like in this 550 range, maybe 600, something like that. I'm going to put in 6 levels just to show you guys what we're talking about here. So see, the weapons that do have that kind of damage, they're like in the 15 divines and upwards. They're not cheap. So yeah, I'm currently farming currency so I can buy my weapon. That's my absolute main focus right now, is I gotta get myself a new weapon as soon as possible, and I gotta get more mitigation as well, just to help me be a bit more tanky. But as you notice from the fight here, my Cloak of Flame with the setup, the defensive setup that I have right now, is the reason why I didn't die against this guy. I had just enough mitigation to make it through that fight, and just enough damage to take care of him at a very high level mostly. So that's good. But yeah, I need a weapon upgrade ASAP. It's just the currency is just crazy on those weapons. I'm also hoping to craft it actually. I'd rather drop it or craft it than buy it on the trade, but I will buy it on the trade if I need to. I am currently all out of divine orbs because I used them on a lot of the defensive upgrades I've made recently. Most of my divine orbs and exalted orbs were spent on getting the Cloak of Flames or the 3 slots, and especially getting that new amulet to give me a bit more effective health pool. And also I spent on getting those jewels. It's true, I didn't talk about jewels. I'll add that into the video description at the end so you guys can find it. But yeah, jewels that add maximum elemental resistance. See that jewel here has got +2 to maximum cold resistance, and I did that with the other elements as well in my tree, so I got somewhat decent jewels. I should reroll them to get maxed out stats. I could corrupt them as well, but I just bought them, most of them, for under a divine. I think there's only one that I paid a divine or more for it. So this one has lightning maximum. This one has fire maximum, and I believe I have one last jewel hiding somewhere. Let's see. So one here, or is it only 3? Oh yeah, there's another here. Okay, so yeah, the cold is here, and then another fire, I believe. Yeah. So I went 2 fires, 1 cold, 1 lightning. Eventually, I'll probably get this jewel socket here and get another 2% somewhere, just to really max out my elemental mitigation. So yeah, right now I got 85, 80, 80. And I feel like I've got just enough to deal with physical mitigation. I could add another 2 in the fire department and add to the elemental, but yeah. So this video should give you guys a pretty good idea of how to build this guy here, how to progress it, and how even to use them at different levels of your progression, cruel campaign, mapping, whatever. with what I gave you. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, found it useful. Hopefully it inspires you to try something different with the Mercenary, because I sure got bored of doing all the time the same poison grenade setup that everybody was running. There's something dull about doing what everybody else is doing. And also it was a very, like I said, repetitive, redundant build. I didn't feel as engaged in the gameplay. This build is really fun to play, satisfying. You take down your big juicy enemies with the shot burst rounds. You're involved, you have to dodge stuff, you have to stay aware. It really solicitates your intelligence, keeps you stimulated, you could say. And it's yeah, it's very involving. It's not just dump a few grenades, wait for this stack of explosions to happen, and do that over and over again. When I was running the poison grenade build with explosive grenades, I would just like cast a few grenades, roll forward, and it was just always the same thing. And all my explosions were like delayed 3 seconds behind me. So it's like you're walking and the mobs behind you die from grenades you left out there like 4 seconds ago, and it doesn't feel responsive, it doesn't feel interactive, which is why I really lean towards this Voltaic grenade. I just gravitated naturally toward it and tried to figure it out myself, just out of noticing the scaling on the damage of Voltaic grenades. So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments in the comments section if you found the video useful. Sure, you can like it and leave your thoughts. Subscribe if you want to see more. I'll probably upload more content if I notice that people are enjoying the videos and engaging with them. So yeah, I'll be happy to look at the comments that you leave and answer your questions. In the previous video I made, someone mention he wanted to have a link to the max roll, or like, you know, a passive tree link so you can consult it, as well as a gem setup link. So I'll include that in the description and you can look at it. So yep, thanks for watching. Have a great evening and a happy new year, guys. 2025 is upon us. Hopefully GGG improves. PoE2, it's already really good. It's a decent start for PoE. I'm expecting them to make the game even better. So yeah, enjoy it. Have